Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We are here in Fargo. Thank you, Mayor Mahoney, for being so hospitable with the new City Hall. It's a beautiful day in Fargo, North Dakota, Cass County, but we've got a weather forecast of more rain on the way, and of course that always makes us nervous, and we're already talking about what would we do again for flood preparations this spring if needed. So that's always first and foremost on our mind. And we're so pleased with all of the leadership from our governor and our senator going forward on our project. The Diversion project has really been the culmination of the work of a lot of people, but especially the leadership of these gentlemen behind me. And without further ado, then I would just like to invite Governor Burgum to the microphone. He has been such a great leader for not only the metro area, but all of Cass County in what our flood protection going forward. So welcome, Governor.
Thank you, Chairman Shirley. Great to be with you. As Mary said, there's so much to celebrate around the teamwork that's been involved in this project that spanned I guess almost a decade, but there are people, when I look around the room today, we got mayors, city administrators, county commissioners, and leaders from both sides of the border that have been really working hard on this incredible project. And again, we want to remind everybody how important this is. Almost 250,000 people that would be protected by the diversion. On the North Dakota side, 55 different school buildings. Of course, there are almost 20% of the K-12 students in the state of North Dakota are inside the protected area. Over $20 billion of property. So we just want to remind ourselves how important this is. But to have a comprehensive project like this takes a huge effort, and not just from a permitting standpoint and engineering design, but it takes great work on financing. And we're so fortunate. We've got one of the strongest CODELs in the nation representing us in Washington, D.C., Congressman Armstrong, Senator Kramer, now Senator Kramer, and former Governor, now Senator Hoeven, down there battling every day. But Senator Hoeven has been on this project since he was governor. He's been a tremendous supporter of this community, and he's got some really great news with our great CODEL. We've had more administrator visits, cabinet level visits in the last 2.5 years than we had in probably in the previous 20 years. We had, I think, our 15th cabinet secretary level visit today. Very exciting announcement was made by Administrator Wheeler earlier today relating to financing for that. And because of this is federal financing, and because Senator Hoeven has been a champion for this, want him to announce this incredibly good news. And how perfect that this financing, which is new legislation that was created 2.5 years, a new program, but that we've got someone who probably understands banking more than any of the other 100 senators making a financing announcement. So here's Senator John Hoeven.
Thanks, Governor. Thanks for your incredible leadership on permanent flood protection for the Red River Valley, and putting together the working group with Governor Dayton really got this thing going again. So I mean, your leadership is moving this thing forward, and that's the kind of vision you have. And that's not just marvelous for the Red River Valley, that's really marvelous for the state of North Dakota. And so I can't thank you enough for it. And to Mary Shirling as head of the Diversion Authority, and of course Mayor Mahoney, all the leadership, Commissioner Campbell, it really takes everybody working together to make this thing happen. And as we've said all along, this is a partnership. So it's a local, state, federal partnership. And what we're talking about today is additional federal financing to help reduce the local cost share. So the citizens of the region, oh, and Bernie Dart is here, another mayor of West Fargo, want to acknowledge him as well. And Mayor Judd wanted to be here, and that's why we've got the very capable Kevin Campbell standing in for him. But that local leadership, so incredibly important, because this is the region. It's not just Fargo, it's not just West Fargo, it's upstream, it's downstream, it's the Minnesota side, it's the whole region. This is for everybody. And it takes all of us working together to fund it. So the local cost share, the local citizens have stepped up. State of North Dakota stepped up with Governor Burgum's leadership and the legislature. On the federal end, as you know, we've got a commitment now for $750 million. The additional news today is that we now have the WIFIA loan approval that we had talked about before. And that's $510 million as of now, could go up to $561 million depending on the eligible cost share. But it's going to make a huge difference because it could reduce the cost of the project over time by as much as $600 million. And that's savings to the local citizens in this area. So that doesn't even take into account that we're going to build the project faster, which is going to reduce the cost, and we're not going to have to fight floods in the future because we have that infrastructure in place sooner. That's the actual interest reductions because it's a lower rate of interest. It's like a treasury rate because of this federal loan guarantee. Also, it's a 40-year loan, so it's a long period of time. You can build it rapidly, pay it back over time, and you only draw the dollars down as you need them. So you don't have to draw the whole loan up front. You just draw money as you need it. That saves costs. So this is all about reducing the local cost share with low interest rate financing and a loan guarantee. We had to appropriate the money through the Appropriations Committee to get it. The way the application works is it's submitted by the Diversion Authority to the EPA. They have invited the application, so it's kind of like being pre-approved for your home loan, okay? Now we go through the actual paperwork to get it done. Pretty exciting stuff. Big step forward today. And again, it doesn't happen without the leadership of the Diversion Authority, the local mayors, and our really fantastic governor. We're here today, we're going to talk about next steps. It's not just now this loan guarantee and low interest rate financing. We've also now set up in the legislation through the Appropriations Committee an alternative financing account, which is $100 million in addition to the project account for the Corps. So again, we're also working on additional federal financing as well. So with that, I'll wrap up right there. And ask if Mayor Mahoney, Gov, did you have some more you wanted to jump in with or just take questions?
Well, I would just, building on what Senator Hoeven said and the work that he's done to help secure this low interest loan and what this means to all the citizens here. The other thing which Senator Hoeven well understands is that the federal government, which is the primary provider of flood insurance, we have at a national level a non-actuarially sound flood insurance program. Premiums going in don't equal the payments going out. So there's two things that you do to fix that. One is you adjust the flood maps to make sure that they match the reality. And with new technologies like LIDAR, you can do that. And what we know what that means for the area around here is that virtually every part of our metro area is going to be in a future floodplain map, which means that people without the diversion coming, if you raise the flood levels, and then you also raise the rates. Those are the two things. You raise the maps, which brings more people into your insurance pool. Then you raise the rates. That's the way you get something back to be actuarially sound. But the future for this area without the diversion, which wouldn't be happening without the financing that Senator Hoeven's talking about, it would mean that people that today are not paying flood insurance would be paying thousands and thousands of dollars for their flood insurance. So not only are we saving taxpayers because of this treasury rate, long-term, highly flexible loan that Senator Hoeven described, we're also going to be saving money when we build a diversion because people are going to be avoiding tens of thousands of homes are not going to have to pay anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000 of flood insurance costs annually, which has been estimated that there could be $30 to $50 million a year coming out of the pockets of people in this community if we don't have flood protection. So this is fantastic news today, and I want to join the chorus of thanking Senator Hoeven for helping get this federal financing secured because this is a great day for the citizens of the region, and not often you can have administrator, cabinet level person come to North Dakota and make a little announcement that takes 5 minutes that saves our citizens hundreds of millions of dollars. But that's what happened today, and it's a big deal, and it's going to help us move this thing forward. And I know from a state standpoint, the state has increased its support, but one of the questions the legislature has had is all the financing lined up? Well, we've taken a huge leap forward in being able to answer yes to that question. So are there others up here that want to talk? Senator Hoeven, back to you. Yep.
Mayor Mahoney?
We're good. Are there any questions for the group?
Yeah, for years now, we've been hearing about planning and the money that's going into the diversion. I think people are very antsy wanting to know when shovels.
Is that Mary? Or you want Joel to
Mary?
answer that?
Well, you know what, we are actually moving dirt now. So this is, it took a while to get the water out of the big hole we have dug south of town, but we actually are moving forward. We will be putting out bids for the actual ditch part of it here in a year or so, but I would at this time introduce Joel Paulson, our new executive director, and he's going to be your point person for all of the answers for all the technical questions and the timelines. And so Joel, do you want to step up and share any?
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. My name is Joel Paulson, Executive Director for the Diversion Authority. And just to tag on to what Mary had mentioned, we just will be anticipating releasing a contract for the wild rice control structure. That will begin construction next spring. She mentioned we're currently in the process of constructing the inlet structure as well. And ongoing flood protection projects in both Moorhead and Fargo. And I would anticipate you would start to see a few more shovels in the ground, as you could say, come 2021 when we're anticipating the developer bid and the start of the actual ditch construction. So.
The other item you have to know, it's a three-legged stool right now, so the WIFIA loans are very important for us. That's one leg is the stool. Federal funding is the next part where the Corps gets the funding to do their part. And the third will be the governor will be working real hard with the legislative session next session to do the rest of the grant money we need for the project. So the people that have helped deliver so far are going to continue to deliver, and we're very excited about that. 26 is when we're going to be done, so.
And we're going to do some further planning next steps. You're welcome to stay if you want, or if you got to get back to your 5 o'clocks, we get that too. That's why we did this on the front end. Anything else, guys? Go. All right, Mary?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
all.
Okay, good. Perfect.
The task force with Minnesota governor, things were stuck in the mud before then, and now we're out, and thanks to Governor Burgum for getting us back on the road again, and it's been a really good year. You know, we've got the Minnesota permit, we had our injunction lifted on the North Dakota side, we had more federal funding appropriated to us. You know, it seems like it's taken a long time to get to this point, but today was a huge day for us. And of course, then I'm back up in the North Dakota legislature appropriated funds for us. And now, you know, the next step will be for us, of course, to go back to DC and talk about what else we need to do there. And we look forward to working with Senator Hoeven on those next steps.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Kev.
Well, as I said out there, I want to thank everybody around the table, everybody here at the table, and a lot of people in the audience have been part of flood protection in Fargo for decades, and it's great to see this milestone day that we have. And again, I want to thank Senator Hoeven for his work, not just on securing the federal appropriations, but also this work on the loan, because putting together a finance package is you know, a key part of this. And I'd say today is it's about as good a news as you could have, because I think I always was confident we're getting financing. I didn't realize we'd be able to participate on over $500 million at low interest, long-term, highly flexible, you know, program that would save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that's a welcome piece of news. And so again, just want to share gratitude to everybody here who's been working to keep this thing moving. And takes a team to get it out of the mud and back on the road, and we had a great team of people that worked to make that happen. So kudos to everybody.
Thank you, Governor.
Mary? Yeah, I might add too that at our last Diversion Authority meeting, we did have some extensive discussion about our financial plan to pay for this. And one of the key components in that was long-term low-interest funding. And it was a part that we were somewhat concerned about, that, you know, we needed to have that component to make this work. And Senator Hoban, thank you for your efforts. This is a critical component to making our financial plan sound. And you know, as our Diversion Authority Board talked about that plan, it was highlighted of the importance, and I think the numbers, if I'm not mistaken, it actually takes our long-term payoff down by 20 years too, in addition to what you talked about, Governor, in terms of saving us $500 million probably in interest expense. It also reduces that length of time for us to pay off that debt, which is that is being backed by the different sales taxes from Fargo and Cass County. And if I can, just for a minute, just to, I know since the Senator and Governor haven't been here, one of the things on the Minnesota side, we continue to work with the legislature there, and we have established on the Minnesota side our what we call the MCC JPA, which is our group that will work with landowners in Minnesota on the project, and we've established that with the similar goals of the Cass County Joint Water Resource District to make sure that all the landowners that we're dealing with on the Minnesota side are being dealt with fairly. And so we had our organizational meeting on that, and now we've hired our land agents, and we continue to pursue the land on the Minnesota side for this project. So that's kind of a little update there.
Thank you, Kevin.
And I would say on that, from our office in terms of the continued collaboration, of course, we've had a switch in administration in the state of Minnesota, but we've been able to move quite seamlessly from Governor Dayton's office to Governor Walz's office. And I think local leaders know he's been to Moorhead multiple times. We've had meetings with him up here, continue to have regular communication between our office and his office, and they continue to deliver the strong support for this project that we saw coming out of the Joint Task Force. So we're optimistic that on the Minnesota side we can secure the support we need to keep moving this project forward. But thanks, Kevin, for all that everybody's doing on the Minnesota side because that's as important part of this project.
This is a team effort. Thank you.
Certainly is. Senator.
Yeah. Well, thanks to the Diversion Authority and Gov, thanks to you. Obviously, that work that we're doing across the Red River with Minnesota, it's really important. And, that's going to be a key part to keeping the project moving. And, I mean, it's exactly how it should work, right? I mean, we're in this together. And so the way you've reached out, Governor, with your counterparts in Minnesota has really move this thing along in a big way. And the same thing, Mary, with you and the Diversion Authority and Mayor Mahoney and Mayor Dardis and our good buddy Mayor Furness. It's great to have you here, Mayor Furness. I haven't seen you for a while. I'm going to digress for a minute. When we needed some help at workforce safety and insurance, at that time I was governor, and we were having a devil of a time. I don't know if you remember. And I came down to Fargo and I said, at that time, former Mayor Furness, he had been out of office for a little bit. I said, is there any chance that you would come to Bismarck and run workforce safety and insurance? And I said, for two reasons. One is because you could come in and do a good job. But that's not the most important reason. The most important reason is because you have the credibility with the media statewide to tell people what you're doing. At a time when that was a big part of the problem, is understanding, what was going on at workforce safety and insurance and sorting through some of the issues between management and labor and all that statewide. And Bruce had the ability, because of this job where there's so much communication required as a mayor, and because of the credibility that he had built up over many years in the office, that he came in and, you know, knock on wood, Gov, because it's under your bailiwick now, but it's been pretty much smooth sailing. It's been pretty much smooth sailing since. Brian Klipfel's in there, former head of the Highway Patrol, doing a beautiful job, and you've done obviously a great job continuing it. But it goes back to Mayor Furness. And so when I talk about the local leadership, that's what I mean. Things just don't move without great local leadership. And this region's really fortunate to have great local leadership. What I'd hope we could touch on today are kind of some of the next steps. This stuff really is complicated, and so we need to be planning and working together carefully because everything changes kind of as we go. And so to keep things on track, we've kind of got to keep planning and adjust as they do. For example, on this WIFIA funding, so on April 16th, we had a meeting, not here, but in the old City Hall, and we talked about getting the WIFIA funding. And so I had included in appropriations bills, which we passed, that stood up another WIFIA program. So you have EPA WIFIA and you have core WIFIA. And so we passed legislation and included funding, so they both have WIFIA programs. But we're actually going to use the EPA WIFIA program because it's of the cost advantages we get with it. But the core pressing and supporting us using it is key to getting approval. So EPA will announce Thursday or sometime this week a whole list of programs, something like 51 programs. Obviously, because the administrator's here, he talked to us about it. That's great. We appreciate it. But the key is between getting funding for both programs and the core's push behind EPA, we got approved, and it's a large amount. I mean, a lot of the projects aren't nearly this amount. So that's very exciting, but the point is, it is as we go, we're adjusting. So now we need to talk about next steps, not only for the WIFIA funding, but also kind of where we're at in terms of the federal funding, because now we're actually looking at 3 different pots. We've got the P3, we've got the alternative financing, and we've got the project account. I can't tell you for sure today which one we'll use. I can tell you we'll use one of them, but we need to be planning in terms of what it is you're looking to construct and when and how fast, so that we can, make sure that we've got at least the federal funds coming in accordingly. You all, and then of course the Gov, are working on the state and the local match. But maybe, we would have John or somebody start out, or Joel, whoever should, and just kind of walk through next steps on the loan application, and then let's get into the work this year and how you need to draw down the funding so we can hopefully keep it coming in time to meet that schedule.
Senator, can I just say one thing about the nimbleness of our leadership here? So basically, we went to Governor Burgum 2 years ago and basically said we'd ask for a WIFIA loan to be in 20 or 21. We had a loan program with the state for $250, and we asked for $870 million. So we came to them and went through that. They went through a tough legislative session, but basically the message we got from the legislative body is tell us how you're going to fund this and how much is it totally going to cost. This WIFIA coming in this year is tremendous for the project. So the governor was nimble to try to change direction and do different things, and you were nimble enough to jump to the EPA rather than the core one. We're not sure when the core is going to be funded, 2021, 22.
No, the core's funded. They can move forward, but we can't get nearly the leverage we can under the EPA. It works better for us.
So with both your leadership, nimble enough to flip, nimble enough to go in a different direction.
Plus we funded more money into the EPA.
Yeah, plus you funded more money. That's okay.
Yeah, and you wanted more, not less, last I checked.
But it's working out pretty well for us. Yeah. And I also wanted, the reason the chippers are out here with John as well is John Shockley was bright enough to look at the EPA loan and started doing that. And he's really happy right now because every one of us kept calling him every night. Did we get it? Did we get it? Did we get it? And we're so happy you guys announced this morning, so now we don't have to call John anymore.
We'd been out of a job if we hadn't got it.
So I'll let Joel and John talk, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Mayor.
I want to check, like Chad and some of the others were down there, and Shelley, if they had anything too before we get into the nuts and bolts.
Senator, I think from my perspective, I'm just more grateful than anything else. And one thing we remiss in noticing is you're here. You were just in Bismarck and now you're here. And I don't know that your schedules allow you to do those things and on such a flexible basis. So I'm grateful for that, because our partners that are in the room right now, the folks that are going to see this on TV and hear the radio broadcasts, need to know that you're invested, and we know you are. But when you show up, it's such an incredibly impactful thing, because I know just how busy you really are. We're all busy, but some of us are more busy than others. And I know one or two of you didn't even know this was happening today, Governor. So you being here, especially on literally a moment's notice, is incredible. So just more thankful, and just say,
Well, we're going to keep going east because the bad weather's coming from the west. Gov and I, when we get a... well, that's kind of how it works. But appreciate...
Thank you, Chad.
Appreciate all you guys are doing. Absolutely.
Well, I'll just start out here. Again, thank you, Senator. Thank you, Governor. I think one thing we all need to keep in mind that's unique about this project is that it's a one-of-a-kind project. The funding plan for this project and what we hope to accomplish is not being done anywhere else in the country. Eyes are on this project from a split delivery aspect, but it's also on this project from a financing aspect. And I think back a decade ago to think how we got to this place, and it is pretty amazing. We're implementing innovative project delivery, we're implementing innovative financing, and you don't get to this point without the collaboration of local, state, and federal sources. And it really is a model for the rest of the country, what we're doing here. And so I thank you, Senator, from the federal perspective and everything you've done to help to bring those innovative aspects to this project. Governor Burgum, you've been absolutely fabulous for keeping this project on course. Obviously, the governor's task force was just key to continuing the progress that we're making here. And all of the local representatives here, you are also passionate about this project. I consider myself the lucky one to be able to work with such fine folks to implement such an impactful project to our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, because John has been instrumental in coming up with the funding, the innovation, and how this is all working out. It was his idea to say, hey, let's look at this WIFIA program and let's see where this thing can take us. Countless hours have been worked by this gentleman. And to answer your question, Senator, he would not have a job had this not come through. So I'll turn it over to John.
First of all, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Governor. Your support for the US EPA WIFIA application was really critical to the process, showing that state and local support for the WIFIA process is critical and it's part of their scoring criteria. So thank you once again. I think I'll answer the first question. What are the next steps in the WIFIA process? So we have been invited to apply for a WIFIA loan, which it's the analogy is to a pre-approval through a mortgage. It's slightly more than that. Once you are invited to apply, it's a process of going through the underwriting and ultimately reaching the closing. They want the program is structured that way because the application costs are quite considerable, because when you're dealing with the quantum of a loan of over $500 million, the application fee is $200,000 to $500,000. So the EPA does not want to invite just any program to pay that application fee without knowing that you're going to reach closing. So over the course of the next couple of months, we'll be assigned an underwriter from EPA. We'll work with that underwriter. We'll have to go to a ratings agency and obtain a rating for the financing for the project.
What's that going to be?
The rating? It has to, under the EPA program, it has to be...
Better than triple B. What's yours going to be?
And I wish Kent Costner was here, but I believe the city of Fargo is AA right now. And so it'll be very close to the city of Fargo and the city of Cass County.
just below.
That's great.
And so that was really critical in the EPA does not want to underwrite any type of project that doesn't meet that minimum requirement of triple B, as the senator had indicated. Once we obtain our ratings, we will then go through an additional process of due diligence where we'll be drafting loan documents. There'll be back and forth between the EPA and myself, and we would eventually expect to reach close anywhere from 8 to 16 months from now. You may ask, why does it take that long to reach close? It's just simply the size of the loan that's involved. This is not a typical $10 million sales tax bond issue. It's much more significant than that, and the federal government requires certain preconditions and wants to make sure the federal interest is protected and making sure they're underwriting good loans. That closing date is consistent with the project, so it doesn't cause any types of delays. We had planned on a closing date if we obtained a US EPA WIFIA loan for 12 to 16 months from now, so it's consistent with our timeline. As the senator had noted, the advantage of this loan is that we can draw down the funds, whereas in a traditional bond issuance, on day one, we'd have all $500 million, and in 6 months, we'd have to start repaying that amount. With the US EPA loan, we can draw it down as it's needed, which is critical to helping the Diversion Authority balance its financial plan with the grants that are being given by the state through the state legislature. And so to the extent that we don't have to borrow money, we'll use grant dollars and sales tax that's on hand, and it allows us to draw down the debt as we need it. It also allows us to defer the initial payments up to 5 years after substantial completion of the project. We're anticipating substantial completion of the project in approximately 6 years. So the deferral of the first payment can be up to 11 years from today's date. So it's very powerful financing with a 35-year repayment term after that. And even more importantly, it has the sculpted financing, so you can sculpt your debt service payments. And in this regard, because we're using a P3 developer, we can pay the P3 payments and balance those with the debt service on the WIFIA. After the P3 payments are completed, which will be paid off before the WIFIA, we can increase the amount of WIFIA payments. So it's a very powerful financing tool. Commissioner Campbell had noted it allows us to pay off our debt sooner. It's absolutely correct because we had to have much longer debt instruments at a much higher interest rate. So the interest rate savings is tremendous, and so it's a great tool for this project. As the senator noted, there's also a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers WIFIA program. They are still in the process of standing up their rules. If and when that program would ever become available, if there were a need for additional funding or financing, we would look to that program. But the nice part about this approval is we're not counting on a program that hasn't quite been fully stood up yet. So it's fantastic. One of the questions that I've heard is, where did the $510 million plus the additional amount come from? The Diversion Authority had applied for a WIFIA loan in the amount of $510 million. WIFIA approved that, plus up to 10%. That is for any potential increases in project costs as bids come in. I think we know traditionally in projects that the engineer's estimate isn't always precise, and so WIFIA likes to include a little bit of extra breathing room, if you would, for between the 5-10, and so they give you an additional 10%. That amount was derived by looking at what the eligible expenses were. The WIFIA program allows a issuer to finance up to 49% of eligible costs. And so the EPA program, we looked at what the stormwater features of the project were, and those were approximately $1.2 billion. And so that's how we arrived at the $510 million number. That was the approximate eligible expenses. In very simplistic terms, I like to divide up how the Corps and the EPA sees the relationship of the WIFIA program between our infrastructure. If it's vertical and it's holding back the river or storage, that would be the Corps WIFIA program. If it's passive and it's conveying meltwater, then it is for the US EPA program. And that's why there's a distinction. It just happens that most of our local cost is associated with the channel and the stormwater infrastructure. And that amount also works nicely with the amount that the state legislature has appropriated. One of the items that we had identified in the legislative session was the need for the low-interest loan. I think that was in Senate Bill 2275, which was not successful in the North Dakota legislature. We took that back after the legislative session and decided what's our next available option, and we decided that we would pursue the US EPA WIFIA loan program with the idea that we had in our back pocket the core WIFIA program. And so that's how we got to where we're at today. The financing plan is very prudent, it's very robust, it takes into account the contingency, and it takes into account the payments that we'll make over the course of construction, and also the payments that we'll make to the P3 developer after the construction is over. And I think overall, our finance plan really represents what the administration initially, when they were discussing infrastructure, and has supported throughout the administration, has been really flipping the federal responsibility from a 80% funding or 65% funding to a 25 to 35% funding in exchange for getting faster project delivery, providing that financing and administration, and showing additional local support for the projects. I think, as the executive director indicated, our project is really a model for how other projects can be financed and operated throughout the country. And I think it's the core, that's why the Corps is interested in our program. I think it's a fantastic program, and once again, without the support of both Senator Hoeven and Governor Burgum, I'm not sure if our application would have reached the finish line like it has. So thank you, and I can certainly answer any additional questions you might have.
I'll just add to John's closing remarks there. If the Corps implements this sort of an arrangement federally, it's going to allow them to do a lot more with less federal dollars. And that's why this is such an important model for the rest of the country, to see how successful this financing is for this mega project in North Dakota. And what better place to do it than right here in North Dakota?
Well, that's one of the interesting things that, and why we need to keep planning for next steps, because, John, you just described the EPA works because it can follow the channel work, which is the local cost share. It would not work if that's what was on the actual diversion piece, which is the Corps, correct? And that's what I mean with this. When I show up here along with the Gov, and we talk about what we're doing, it's like we got to keep checking in, because this thing changes as you develop the project. I mean, it's a huge project, $2.8 billion, and how we're funding it is different, and how we're applying these programs is different, than maybe we thought, a year or so ago or whenever it was. So it's just really important that you continue to keep us abreast of exactly how it's going to work, so that we're chasing down, the right sources of funds that will actually work for you. Just like we say, I mean, I think under the core program, it would be problematic, but because you can use it on the channel, the EPA piece works well, and it actually saves you more money than the core approach would, based on at least how they've initially presented it to us, even though that's the direction we were going. Now this looks like a better fit. So that's why and it's complicated. So for myself and my crew, you have to keep us apprised, and that's why we appreciate this planning process and these meetings very much.
And I think from the Corps side, to complete the Corps portion of the project, they will need their continued funding. And I think that there's a proposal that the Corps has for a work plan that they've presented to us as the authority regarding, I think it was $100 million this in 2020, and $200 or $300 million in 2021. I think it's absolutely critical that the Corps is able to complete their portion of the project, so that we can provide flood protection to the region. The worst, in my opinion, the worst position that we could be in is if we are still waiting for the southern embankment to be completed, and we have completed the channel. And so making sure that there's the continued funding for the Corps is, that'll be the next important step. And that's going to stay consistent with that federal limitation of the $750 million in the PPA. So right now, it's just making sure that those appropriations are continued throughout the schedule that the Corps is coming up with so that we can complete the southern embankment on time.
Johnny, just give you 500 million. Can he take a day off and then
Yeah.
begin to work on that?
And I agree. Yep, so.
How much of that does the federal cost share cover?
Of the
Core work.
The federal share is not more than 750 million. I believe the southern embankment cost estimate is about 703 million with contingencies. And so they have a work plan that they've produced that would fund the project over the next 4 or 5 years.
So it's within that, that's where I'm going with. So,
It's within their work plan, and you'll get that, how much they need every
Correct.
year.
right, and what are they doing right now in terms of, I thought we were like 140 million, is that right?
That sounds about right.
Yep, that's about right, Senator.
And they think they can do 100 million more?
That's correct.
Next
For
year?
for 2020. And the critical path is the Red River control structure, and that's estimated to begin construction in 2021. It's being designed right now. If that does not start on time, we are not able to complete the project on time because that is the longest part of construction for the project.
And on time means what?
In 6 years, and have it operational.
Starting on time.
The starting in time would be beginning construction in 2021, which would mean they would need the appropriation to cover the entire cost of that structure in 2021. Right now, the Corps' estimated work plan would be 300 million for 2021. Yeah, in 1 year. So it's a big ask. The Red River control structure is estimated at about 238 million. And the Corps will not release a contract for that project unless they have the money in hand. So that's why it's critical that we maintain the federal appropriation with our eye on 2021 and ensuring that we get the appropriation to begin the control structure in that year. Otherwise, it pushes the Corps' southern embankment completion out until that project begins.
Okay, so 2021 is the big year.
That's correct.
Okay.
We'll let you ponder that for 24 hours and come back with the plan, John.
For John, on one thing as part of what, like the Senator was saying, to stay synced up on the rating portion of this. I know Fargo's got a strong rating, Cass County's got a strong rating. State of North Dakota's balance sheet's getting better every month. If there's a way that we can work with you as one of the financing partners to help get that bond rating as strong as possible, if that has a material impact on the interest rate over the next 40 years, we'd like to work with you on that. Because if we're creating bond rating uncertainty because of legislative uncertainty, I mean, that would be another reason to, and I see we've got Senator Roars here who understands project financing, but it'd be another thing for us to get back in front of the legislature to make sure that if we can eliminate any state funding uncertainty as a way to strengthen the bond rating, then that's another way to save money for taxpayers.
We'd probably like to meet with you, Governor, and your staff to talk about that because things have flipped with this WIFI alone. So there's a lot of different options we could talk about. And that's fantastic if the state helps us out with those loan guarantees. So that really does our bond rating better and a better rate. And then if Senator Hoeven can make sure to keep the interest rates down over the next 2 years, that would help us as well. So small assignments, but it'd really be helpful. But we'd love to sit down and talk to you because some things have modified now with this loan.
That's a good point on the rates. So does that affect your drawdown?
No, the great thing about WIFIA loan is once we close, that locks in the interest rate.
That's what I thought. See, that's part of the big deal about this is rates are really low right now. So you want to keep moving.
Yes, I can't say enough how thankful I am for all of your efforts.
You're saying timing's everything,
This is a really big moment for the project. It saves so much money for local taxpayers. I just personally can't thank you guys enough for the support that you've had throughout this process. It was absolutely critical to getting it done.
Is there anything else we should be talking about? And Gov, you may have something on the state end, but as far as the approvals, because one of the things, is we're appropriating back there, and I have to deal with OMB and Corps, Army, and all these different guys. is they ask about, any litigation or, any of those issues as far as being able to proceed. Is there anything, and I know, maybe you're ready to cover some of those bases or not, but is there anything else we should know in that regard as far as being able to do the work and proceed?
So a great question. The judge back in April issued an order in the federal case permitting the construction of elements on the North Dakota side of the river as long as we comply with the Minnesota permitting requirements. The contested case hearing is on schedule on the Minnesota side, and we have to wait for that process to work itself out. I think that the scope of that appeal of the permit is very limited. There's two questions that were determined to be within the scope of the review. The first is for a legal standard of, do the two cities of Wolverton and Comstock even have standing to contest the permit? And the second was the diversion project, the Plan B, was that a reasonable and prudent option for the diversion authority to accept? So given that that came out of the governor's task force of Plan B, and it was also identified in the scoping documents for the environmental review, along with the determination of adequacy, we feel pretty comfortable that the contested case hearing is going to resolve itself. But it's a process. It takes some time, and there's not a lot that we can do to speed that up other than be prepared to litigate it, which we are. We're getting ready to litigate it. So.
Will that affect construction on the North Dakota side?
Another great question. It's not going to impact the diversion inlet, which is currently under construction right now. It is not going to impact the Wild Rice Inlet. And with regards to letting of the P3 contract, we had already programmed into the P3 schedule the contested case hearing. One of the considerations was whether or not the bidders would have questions about the contested case hearing and want to bid without knowing how that was resolved. And so we had programmed that into the schedule where we won't receive bids until after the contested case hearing is over. And so that was already programmed into the schedule. And so we don't view it as negatively impacting the construction schedule just because it's such a big contract. It takes some time to get a $1 billion contract ready to be bid out. And then we had these other financing items that we needed to resolve to check the box, which WIFIA checks a big box. And so we're on schedule, both from a financing perspective, and the construction should proceed as we had planned.
And I would just add that we are actively purchasing land in the channel itself. And so that's all going to be on schedule and ready to go when we let that bid, and that land will be available in the channel. And then we're working on flowage easements in the south of the southern embankment.
Okay.
Anyone else want to add anything? Commissioner Wayland? Commissioner Carlson?
Commissioner Campbell did a good job for Minnesota, so.
Commissioner Steen?
I'm good, thank you. I worked with John and Tony on the finance plan. I feel very comfortable with that. We've detailed it out quite, through the 5 or 10 year program we've got, so I feel very comfortable with that. And just add my kudos and thanks to the governor and the senator and everyone else involved. Thank you.
Just so you know, he's a real conservative accountant, so if he likes it, it's pretty good.
Mayor Dardis, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I just have one comment. I've been involved in this in about 6-7 years now, and as a peripheral through the Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things that I'm saddened today by is that some of the other partners that aren't here, partners that have been instrumental, the Chamber of Commerce, the home builders, the list goes on and on. And as I see this collaboration and all this fine work that the Clay County and Cass County and the elected officials have done, it is amazing. Kevin said it best. It has been an absolute team effort. And to get to this point, Senator, Governor, thank you so much. And Mr. Paulson and I had the pleasure of serving on the joint governors. And there was no doubt in my mind after the second meeting with your leadership and how Governor Dayton had embraced this. And again, I haven't mentioned Delray Williams. She was instrumental. Maury Lanning was instrumental in getting Governor Dayton involved, as Delray was. So again, I like to consider myself a regional person, and being an observer of this, but somewhat engaged, it's been an amazing process to watch, and you should all be very proud. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor.
I was just going to say thanks again, Joel and Bernie, for serving on that. It was a interesting time with a good outcome, and had to get 5 full days of the Minnesota governor and his staff and the senior DNR leadership team who all attended every meeting. 5 full days. I mean, that's quite remarkable. When you go around the country, you can't come up with it. You can't find other governors where a neighboring state where they committed to 5 full days of meetings with a 16-person task force, and then actually had A, that doesn't happen, and B, have a great outcome at the end of it. So it's and of course, as we know, then we got the DNR support in time for the ruling, which then allowed some of the contracts for the Corps to not expire, which probably saved another $50 million or more in terms of the timing of when we got that ruling last spring. So I mean, might have seemed slow, but we were moving up against the deadline and beat that deadline. So that was fun news. But one of the people that really helped marshal that from our side was Levi Bachmeyer. And some of you may know that Levi had his last day on our team last Friday, and he had his first day as the business manager of West Fargo Public Schools on Monday. And as I said in the remarks, if you're going to lose a talented team member, to a location, having him land in the business manager job of the organization that's doing some of the most building in the floodplain of any organization in the community, that's a great place to land as business manager. And I know that Levi is going to continue to be very committed to this. And since he's not here today, I'm going to volunteer him that Chairman Shirley and others, you should, now that he's a resident, his wife teaches in West Fargo School District, they just got married this summer, they're living here in this community, that the Diversion Authority shouldn't hesitate to tap into him as a resource to be part of your team going forward, because he was instrumental in managing the relationship with the governor's office in Minnesota, and now he's going to be in a position to here locally to speak on behalf of the education community. And one of the, I think they're the largest employer in West Fargo, aren't they, Bernie? What are they up to? A couple thousand?
I thought that was Cook Signs I thought Cook Signs was the largest.
I said West Fargo. I said
West
Fargo. But I mean, I know they've got a couple thousand employees at least over there, and so largest employer and largest builder, and to have Levi in that spot is going to be a big plus for the Diversion Authority. So happy for this project that he's landed there.
Governor, I'm having a meeting with Levi at 7 o'clock this evening. I'll share that good news that you just volunteered for.
Yeah, I said voluntold. He got voluntold to help on the.
Thank you. Shelley, Commissioner Carlson.
Thank you. As a newest member of this committee, I've only been on for about 2 months, so I really would like to thank you. Trying to absorb all this information, the entire afternoon of onboarding that I spent with Mr. Shockley was quite the mind-blowing experience. Might have taken a few ibuprofen at the end of that meeting, but I do really appreciate, and it's astounding the amount of work that this board has put into this project and the amount of work that is going to still have to be done even moving forward. But these are certain hurdles that certainly needed to be covered and achieved prior to a lot of this happening. So thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much, Governor, and particularly all the members of the board. I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this and to showcase the work that can happen between 2 states and a border community, which I think happens frequently in this community. And I am just very proud of being a part of this. So thank you very much.
And I just want to go back again and say about Senator Hoeven, which is, you work in an organization with 100 members, and I think a huge percentage understand the need for lawyers, John. But surrounded by lawyers, we're fortunate that we've got a senator that's got a business background, he's got an MBA, he's got a banking, ran the bank in North Dakota so well when he did and understands this because, I mean, I'm telling you, there are people in DC that could not even describe this financing package, less design the, when John's describing how perfect this is, and how it works for our project, to be like, wow, it's almost like a banker designed this. So anyway, we're just so fortunate as a state to do that, and I agree with what Joel's saying. Having been at the White House for infrastructure days where they invited governors, county commissioners, city leaders in and talk about the shift of where in the old days it was 80% Fed, 20% local, and political clout got the money. One of the shifts that's happening right now is much higher percentage of local funding, and that sends a really deep signal to the federal government of how much local support there is. I've gone so far as to say that all federal funding, at the rubric for the Corps, the rubric for the EPA, when we were talking to the administrator about this, we just said, hey, the criteria for whether you fund a project should be not, it shouldn't be like 18th on the list is their local funding. It should be number one, because if the local citizens are willing to step up and support it, then that's where the federal government should put its money, because then the federal government is able to spend $1 and have the biggest impact. And what it could mean for our country if we started with flexible funding programs like this, funding stuff that had strong local support, we'd see infrastructure improve in our country. And so it was said casually about, the country's looking, but I think it's actually important. North Dakota's got the ability to lead in a lot of directions, but with the way Senator Hoeven's teed this thing up for us, we have an opportunity to actually lead on this thing and change the way the government thinks about infrastructure projects. And wow, wouldn't it be great? Private sector involvement, private-public partnerships, building in 6 years. I mean, we say that and then here nobody even blinks. I mean, there's so many projects that have taken 10 or 20 years to get built and then they've still maybe being hung up. So if we can do this thing, it can actually change the way our country works. And so I'm really grateful for all the work you're doing, but thanks again, Senator Hoeven, for giving us a shot to show the federal government how we can get it done here in North Dakota and Minnesota.
That's the right place to end on. This is, again, this metro area really doing something that's kind of a first in many ways for the country. So you got to feel really good about that. So, good work. All right.
Thank you all for joining.